my grandpa then gave me his last bottle of mead, which was pretty epic. I was 19, back from training in the Navy. During the summer, I was in ROTC in college. Got to hang out with my grandpa, and he was like 86 at this point, getting pretty old, starting to slide into Alzheimer's and dementia. But we were cleaning out the garage, and then we got to the attic in the garage, which was kind of his man cave workshop, rad space where he'd do all kinds of cool stuff. And there in the back was one last case of stuff from his old tasting room. And I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a bottle of mead in there. And we, take our time, and there's pear wine, berry wine, grape wine, apple wine. And the last bottle I pull out is his last bottle of mead. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't had mead yet. Like, in my mind, mead has just built and built and built. Pop, can I have this bottle of mead? And he goes, oh yeah, I'm not going to drink it. so he gives it to me, and I take it up to school with me. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and we met in the Navy training that summer. She was going to go study abroad in France for the year. And so we got to spend a few days together. And the last evening we opened this bottle of mead, and it is just like drinking sunlight. It is like the golden hour on a summer afternoon,
Welcome back, everybody. My guest this time is Frank Golbeck. Frank's got quite a bit of military service in his family, but as a kid, that wasn't going to be his path. Well, until he was in high school and 9/11 happened, and then everything changed. When he graduated, he went to college on an ROTC scholarship, initially wanting to be a Marine. But things happened, and he was given the opportunity to switch over to the Navy, and being an avid surfer, he jumped at the chance of being out on the ocean. Spent a couple years as an officer in the Navy, but an injury and some other experiences caused him to get out at his EAS. Today, he's the co-owner of Golden Coast Mead. His story of how he came to be infatuated with mead is interesting. It started with his grandfather. He'd actually been brewing mead while he was active in the Navy. He's an interesting character, and I say character in a endearing way, and he's got an interesting story. So let's get into it. Here's episode 125 with Frank Golbeck.
We're helping people dream of what happens after.
Exactly.
Yeah, and then identify plans, paths, perspectives that help people get out.
The one thing I will say, though, is and we're going to get there and talking about mead, I kind of have this feeling like we should be sitting here either in medieval armor or a Viking helmet and a big suckling pig between us.
Well, that is part of the mead program, but one of the things that I love about it is it's our hunter-gatherer ancestors 50,000 years ago that first found mead, right? Before there was agriculture, before there was civilization as we know it, our hunter-gatherer ancestors are finding trees that have, housed bees, and then they blow over in a storm, and then that water gets into that mix of honey, and yeast just floats in the air. So now you have all the key ingredients in mead: honey, water, yeast, naturally fermenting. And so our hunter-gatherer ancestors find this drink, and they're like, this is the food of the gods. And then there's archaeological evidence of 30,000 years ago, a leather bag with a fermented honey beverage. And then follow that to 10,000 years ago in China at the beginning of civilization, where they're doing pottery, you find mead in the Jihu River Valley. And then like 8,000 years ago in India, and then all throughout Europe. So also in Central America, the Mayans are drinking alcohol made from honey. So like mead has existed in Africa and Asia and Europe and Central America, which, kind of spreads from northern South America to southern North America. So call it 5 out of 7 continents that humans have been drinking mead. And there are some archaeologists who make the argument that we gave up this hunter-gatherer lifestyle of like maybe 8 to 20 hours of work a week to have this 40 to 60 hour work week so that we could have a regular source of booze. We could grow grain and grow grapes and then have beer and wine, because mead was too rare, too hard to find.
And in the grand scheme of things, comparing it to wine and the fermenting of grapes, if I'm understanding correctly, it truly is nature's natural alcohol.
Totally. Yeah, we don't need agriculture to make it. Honey is the most sugar-rich food that naturally occurs. So it will ferment and turn into mead in the wild, or it's pretty easy. Ken Schramm, who's one of my mead-making mentors, talks about a archaeological theory that hasn't fully been proven, but fire was this key technology that brought us out of Africa and on the human diaspora around the world. Maybe fermentation was another key one. So the people that carried the fire and then the people that carried this magic fermentation bag where you threw fruit and you threw grain and you threw honey into this bag and it fermented. The hypothesis is that it inoculates your gut with the microbiome of this new place, and the alcohol moderates that, right? So now you can move into this new place and not have your system get totally overwhelmed. You've inoculated it with these microbiota that live here in this fermented drink made from honey and fruit and grain. So there's a lot of archaeological evidence on these super beverages, a mix of all three. And if people are interested in it, they can check out Dr. Patrick McGovern from Penn State, and it's just like fascinating stuff. And anyways, I could go on about it.
So basically, you're not involved in mead simply for the sake of getting drunk.
No, my grandpa used to make it, and when I was little, I watched him pour 2 1-ounce pours for this 6-foot tall guy that walked into my grandfather's tasting room, kind of grumpy and kind of scary. As an 8-year-old kid behind the bar, I was like, oh, I don't know about this guy. But my grandpa just pours in 2 1-ounce cups of this golden drink. And then the guy's laughing and smiling. And I was like, Pop, what was that? Like, that was some kind of potion. And he told me it was mead, the adult drink made from honey. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Obviously, I'm not an adult, but I do like honey. And so I read the stories about mead, Beowulf, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. And I'm like, wait, the stuff that warriors drink before and after slaying monsters, the stuff that wizards and elves drink, like that was the stuff my grandpa was serving this guy. My dad worked at Disneyland for 30 years. Like, I saw how the magic at Disneyland is really just stage magic. Like, that was real magic. What happens there? So
because Disneyland didn't have mead, that's why.
Yeah, what's going on? Yeah, so my grandpa then gave me his last bottle of mead, which was pretty epic. I was 19, back from training in the Navy. During the summer, I was in ROTC in college. So, got to hang out with my grandpa, and he was like 86 at this point, getting pretty old, starting to slide into Alzheimer's and dementia. But we were cleaning out the garage, and then we got to the attic in the garage, which was kind of his man cave workshop, rad space where he'd do all kinds of cool stuff. And there in the back was one last case of stuff from his old tasting room. And I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a bottle of mead in there. And we, take our time, and there's pear wine, berry wine, grape wine, apple wine. And the last bottle I pull out is his last bottle of mead. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't had mead yet. Like, in my mind, mead has just built and built and built. Pop, can I have this bottle of mead? And he goes, oh yeah, I'm not going to drink it. So he gives it to me, and I take it up to school with me. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and we met in the Navy training that summer. She was going to go study abroad in France for the year. And so we got to spend a few days together. And the last evening we opened this bottle of mead, and it is just like drinking sunlight. It is like the golden hour on a summer afternoon,
Age and fermentation wise, how old was that bottle approximately at that point?
Yeah. My approximation is around 9 years.
Oh, okay.
At that point. And it had lived in an attic in East Los Angeles County. So, hot in the summer, cold in the winter. It was under screw cap, and it was done with a wine yeast and a relatively high ABV, high sugar content, which are all key pieces to aging mead. But I remember it as like just the mead of poetry, like just perfect, and put a rose tint on everything. My wife's like, I don't really remember that.
Well, you offered a nice segue. So where is hometown for you? Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Costa Mesa, Southern California, went to public school, and was in 11th grade when September 11th happened. So that was a big part of being interested in joining the military. Before that was pretty pacifistic, like how can fighting wars reduce the amount of violence in the world, and then realized, oh, we need people from all walks of life who are interested in defending our country and representing our values abroad. I think I want to be one of those people. And I met my stepmom's cousin, who was a colonel in the Army at the time. And I expected him to roll up in a black sedan with black sunglasses, you know, and he rolls up in a VW Westphalia Eurovan. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And we start talking, and he talks about he was part of the strategic arms limitation treaties, so reducing the number of nuclear weapons in the world, and was there for Gulf War I and Gulf War II, and just
was that your first time meeting him?
Yeah. My dad had just hadn't gotten married yet, so yeah, it was first time meeting him.
Family wise, brothers, sisters,
uncle and grandfather. 3 grandfathers. No,
I'm talking you. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I got an older sister.
And family-wise, going towards the military aspect, was there a military component?
Yeah, my grandfather on my mom's side was a B-17 pilot in World War II. Flew all of his missions and then a few more. So we grew up kind of with that like legendary status and understanding more and more as we grew up how intense and incredible that was. I got to go up in a B-17 a couple of years ago. I don't know if you've ever had that chance, but it's like a flying school bus. I mean, this thing is like, the walls are that thick, the metal walls are like 1/8 of an inch thick, maybe. And you can see the cables from the pilot's cockpit to the wings and the
function
tail.
Only.
Yeah. Like, and then the bomb bay is like some iron beams and some doors. Like, we could build this thing, and and it was just incredible to get to fly. It was the Collins Foundation that hosts that.
Well, you figure as big as they are, and the fact that they need to be able to fly and carry enormous payloads, you got to figure they were built with the absolute minimum amount of weight possible.
That's a good point. Yeah. But even, the radios, like you look at these radios and it's like a transistor radio with like a few fuses and that's it. It's like
2 Dixie cups and a really long piece of string.
Like, my grandpa's 24 pilot, captaining this plane. And it's like, okay, I always had this kind of grand vision in my mind. And it's like, guy was flying a school bus with a crew of 18 and 19-year-olds,
I'm picturing the old days of like when kids first started making go-karts, but not motorized, but just wood with wheels. It's kind of, in a weird way, it's so rudimentary compared to what aircraft are today. You're kind of like,
and what they accomplished with it. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. So my grandfather flew B-17s on my mom's side. On my dad's side, my step-grandfather flew P-51s. And then my dad's dad was in the Pacific Theater. Pretty wild. I mean, I don't know how much your audience is interested in this, but he was an infantry guy at the end of the Pacific Theater. When the way that I've put together a story, and it'd be interesting to really dive into the records and see if it matches with the story that I understand, but he got shipped out at the end of the conflict and they were mustering to go invade, I think, mainland. And it gets called off day after day, and he gets appendicitis, and his sergeant's like, really? Punches him in the gut. My grandpa keels over, and they're like, all right, he's not faking it. So he goes to sick bay and like gets sent to the hospital because he's got appendicitis and it's ruptured now. So
exacerbated by a punch to the gut.
A little gut check there.
I'm sure that's not in any medical books. Hey, somebody's complaining of appendicitis. Punch him in the gut to check.
By the 3rd day that you're going to go invade like mainland Japan, you probably have to make sure your guys are ready to fight or not. Yeah. So, whether that was the time that Truman and the staff was determining whether the atomic bomb was going to be used or not, I'm not sure. But my grandpa was at the end of his life when he was telling me these stories. It's like these stories only get told at a certain point. Right. And he said, he got shipped off. And the way that I put the story together is that was the time that the atomic bomb use was getting deliberated, and they were mustering and preparing the siege and then calling it off, mustering, preparing the siege, calling it off. And so that third time, Grandpa wasn't going to go. And, you know, in my mind, it's like, am I here because the atomic bomb got dropped? Because the likelihood that my grandfather was going to survive that storming was very low. So I don't know. It's a bit of a wild question.
Your dad, was he a Vietnam era?
He was. He had a high draft number and was college grad, or a college student. So he never went. My uncle was a Vietnam Army guy, got to join the Corps of Engineers, and then ended up in Thailand as an architect, which is what he does now. He's one of the architects at LAX.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You mentioned your dad worked at Disneyland.
Yeah.
What did he do?
So started out in an executive training group and failed out of that. So he worked in the parking lot and was a ride operator through our whole childhood, which was a lot of fun. We got to go to Disneyland all the time. And, you know, he would pull us aside and see how Main Street, the castle looks so big, but when you get up there, does it feel that big? No. Well, that's forced perspective, you know, and when you're walking down the street, it feels like it takes so long because the buildings in the back are shorter than the buildings in the front. So it makes it feel like you got a lot of more ground. But then when you're leaving, you're like out of there and you're like, wait, it's over. And these are intentionally used, you know, tricks to get the audience to really buy the show, right? That this is a show. And if too many details are out of place, the magic breaks. So my dad was really passionate about that. He'd studied drama in college, and working at Disneyland, he took it full on, became a team lead, and then got taken into Imagineering the last 12 years that he was there. So he managed the library of all the materials. He then got into show quality and documentation, going around the park and catching all the things that are starting to wear out, so that if the customer sees, or the guest, because they call them like guests instead of customer, if the guest sees too many glitches, then the magic breaks and the suspension of disbelief stops. And it's like, oh, I'm just at an amusement park. But, you know, when everything's in place, then the kids and the parents are having an equally good time because they're all in this kind of magic realm. So he was the guy that went around and put in the jobs to get those things fixed. And then he finished doing training. So training all the cast members on the stories that they were acting out on each of the rides. And so growing up there was pretty incredible because like Walt had this dream that everyone could have fun together, right? You go to Disneyland and it doesn't matter where people are from, what they believe, where they, you know, socioeconomic, like there's all kinds of people there and they're all there to have fun. And it's pretty cool because before that, I don't know if there was a place like that, but growing up there, I got to see that happen and it was inspiring.
Does the nostalgia still hit you today when you're there?
Yeah, like, you know, we can afford to go once a year.
You and 99% of the rest of the population.
So if that, right? It's like, it's getting more expensive. But we take our kids and, you know, I tell them these stories. I tell them the stuff that my dad showed me and I think it inspires them. And I think it makes us all kind of embrace that, like work is a part of it, but imagination is a part of it. And when work and imagination line up, we can do incredible things that inspire other people and create this sense that, oh, life is this beautiful adventure, you know, and without that, I think life can lose a bit of that feeling.
Were you of the era when there was still tickets, or was it already a general admission single cost?
Yeah, I never did the e-tickets.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm a little older than you.
Yeah.
But one of the cool things to think about is, so you mentioned that your uncle was the architect for LAX?
Yeah, he's still working on it.
So you grew up seeing Disneyland from a different perspective through your dad's eyes and what he was showing you.
Yeah.
I grew up seeing LAX with a different perspective because my dad worked for American Airlines, and going in and around areas that not necessarily every flying passenger would get to go to. And so it gives you a different perspective on something that for most of the people in the world, they just see Disneyland as the Magic Castle and the events. Boom, I'm in, I'm out. And they don't really see
Buy my ticket, have the experience, kind of get overwhelmed, drive home like, whoa, what was that? Not like, there are literally, you know, one piece of trash is on the ground for like an average of 3 minutes at Disneyland. Where else in the world is that the case, right? There are so many people whose job it is just keep it spotless. And like going to the airport, right? It's like your luggage disappears behind the check-in, but there's so many moving parts to make that thing get to the other side of the country with you. And yeah, man, I respect and admire that. And I think it's relevant to this show, right? In that we're in the Navy or the military, and we like get trained in a job, and we start to see there's this whole system that we're a part of. But like there are systems everywhere. And there are so many places that people can add value by making work smoother, by making people happier in their work. And like, I think the military trains us to get a job done. And when they're really successful, they get us to think about the system that we're a part of and how we can make the whole system work better. And I think that's a big skill set that's transferable if people intentionally develop it.
With you and your exposure to Disneyland, well, taking a step back, your dad worked there for so many years. Was he from California and just happened to get a job, or did he come specifically because I want to work at Disneyland?
That's a great question. So he moved out right after the war with his family because his stepdad was an engineer at Lockheed. He flew P-51s and then got advanced degree and then got to did he use the GI Bill to get that degree? Anyways, he worked at Lockheed. He helped develop the black box, which is pretty cool, but they were living in Glendale, and but before that they were living in East LA, so that he could like ride his bike down to the studios and like check out Hollywood in the 50s. Like as a kid, that was where he like stomped around, you know. So he loved Hollywood. He loved TV. He loved Disney. And then he met my mom in college, and they were farming in San Bernardino on my grandfather's apple ranch. And the farm was having a hard time because their export business was really dropping off. And they were trying to make a switch over to retail, but family politics, kind of no one wanted to really focus on that. And so my dad had to get another job.
Never the bane of any existence, family and running a business.
My father-in-law is successful in working with his siblings in business because their family taught them, hey, when you're doing business, it's business. And I think that discipline and that respect that's necessary and that accountability, you know, if it's not there, a business is going to fall apart. But if it's there, a family can operate a business if business is business when it's being done, right? So
as long as everybody's on the same page.
Yeah. And we were like so grandpa, great-grandpa, great-great-grandpa. So I'm fifth generation of that side of the family that was running that apple ranch, and I didn't get to run it, but I got to tromp around there. And right now it's still accessible. People can go there. The Wildlands Conservancy, the biggest private landowner in the state of California, keep it open as a working apple ranch and a preserve. So rather than getting developed into row houses, it got turned into this beautiful preserve that everyone can go to, Los Rios Ranch up in Yucaipa, Oak Glen, California. So,
I was just going to go to that. Is it part of the Oak Glen? I'll call it the area.
Yeah. The Apple Ranch Enclave in Oak Glen. Yeah. Right at the top, the big one at the top, that was in my family for 5 generations before me, which is pretty rad. And we can still go there. We try to go there once a year, get the cider, still tastes the same. Do the you pick apples. It's great. So
it's easier just to get the bag of already picked.
Totally. But when you got little kids, it's like, this is $20 bag of apples. But that's what our family wanted to do. And my grandpa actually trained our neighbor, the Rileys, who now run it, which is kind of cool. So whenever we see them, they're playing music on their fiddles, and it's cool. And they have a fermented cider business up there that I kind of like, hey, it's not too hard to get your licenses. Like you can totally. So my dad had to get a job off the farm, and Disneyland was like, you know, a 40-minute drive at that time for me. And he got back in after that little executive development speed bump, and was working in the parking lot and working as a ride operator.
So always just kind of interested in the quote unquote magic of making movies, making
telling
people
stories.
kind of forget what's going on today.
It's cool. My dad he loves the art for its own sake. Like since he's retired, he does community theater, and he was recently Scrooge. Last year he was Scrooge in a community theater, and it was so rad to just see him embody this guy who goes through this transformational experience. Because it's like he has gone through that, and I think he loves it because it's an art you can really feel. And, there's art you can look at, there's art you can listen to, but like drama to him is, I think, an art that you can really feel. And when he sees the audience feel those feelings, he's like, hopefully that helped them on some level, whether it was just a little bit of recreation and escapism, or whether it was like deep, meaningful healing, transformation kind of stuff.
Well, it's got to be cool for when you talk in the perspective of an artist who performs in front of an audience. So whether it be, I've said this where I can't imagine what it's like for somebody to write a song and then to perform in front of a large group and they sing your song back to you. Has to be amazing.
Yeah.
But even as an actor on a stage where you can look out and see the people feeding off of what you're performing, which then has to feed you.
Totally. Yeah, it's so cool to see him act and get into it and see the audience then get into it. And it's like we're in a different level of reality,
Let's get back onto you a little bit.
Sure.
So as a young boy, what did you like doing? What took up your time?
Oh, man. So I played sports. I played in the neighborhood a lot. I was really lucky to have neighbors across the street who were our age. And so we were just like nonstop. Did some martial arts, which I think was really good for me. And then when I got into surfing, that became like every free moment. If I could swing it, I'd be there after school. I'd be there on the weekends. And then I made the surf team our sophomore year of high school, and that was epic. Like start your week twice a day, or start 2 days a week at surf team from, it's like,
yes, please.
Yeah, it was amazing. Do you surf?
No.
Okay. Yeah.
It's one of those things that I did it a long time ago when I was in high school. Never got any good at it, but it's always in the back of my mind. It's like, I want to dedicate some time to get back to it.
Totally. My mom always said, well, my grandpa surfed, her dad surfed, and she surfed and body surfed. And she was like, Frank, surfing's a sport you can do into your old age if you keep your body healthy. And it's just such a joy that I hope, it's like on the vision board is me with 90 years old with like the right size board and being able to surf still. So that's kind of what I mean. And the moment, every wave is different. It's such a vigorous and demanding sport on one level, but if you try too hard, you lose. So like life. So surfing is this meditative
go
exercise.
with it instead of trying to fight it.
Yeah. If you fight it, you're just going to exhaust yourself and it's going to not be that fun. So I love surfing, and that then I think kind of influenced me towards the Navy. I did want to be a Marine originally, which realized I wasn't a good fit at OCS. About 5 out of 6 weeks, they were like, Golbeck, I don't think you're a good fit here. And I'm like, I'm not. And they're like, no, you're going home. And I'm like, okay. But my ROTC unit was like, what happened, Frank? And I'm like, yeah, everything. When you're at a review board, you give very straight, clear answers. But I got a chance to lateral transfer to the Navy, and that was a much better fit. The ocean is something that I've always loved, and I wanted to lead. I wanted to be involved in the events of the world. I wanted to see the world and serve. So they gave me the chance to transfer over to Navy ROTC, which was great. And then I drove ships in the Navy for almost 3 years, and that's a whole story. But then I got to work for an admiral's staff. And I know you asked me about my childhood, and here I am talking about my time in the Navy. But we could break.
You're jumping ahead. You're jumping ahead.
Totally.
When you got into surfing, was there anything in your mind that thought this might be something that I could pursue beyond just a hobby?
So I grew up in Orange County, where like a lot of the surf industry, after Hawaii, where like the surf industry is very focused, but not as much business over there, but the sport, like a lot of Hawaiians become professional surfers because it's one of the most demanding waves. And if you can make it out there, then you can kind of make it anywhere in the world. Whereas Southern California, we have some good waves, but we had the industry built up. And so friends' parents were in the industry. Some friends were surfing enough and were good enough to get sponsored and stuff. But it just always seemed like that lifestyle was not going to be as well-rounded a lifestyle as I imagined having. Like, to be really competitive, I didn't see these guys going to college and developing a broader skill set than just really focusing on surfing. So
even as a young man, in your scope of what you expected for yourself, you wanted more than just simply wake up in the morning, go surf, eat tacos in the afternoon.
And I mean, those guys that are pro surfers, they wake up in the morning, go surf, then they work out, then they go surf, then they review tapes of their 2 surf sessions, and then they do it again tomorrow. You know, like, it has become that level of competition. And to be that good would mean just kind of, you know, creativity, scholastics, leadership opportunities, world events. Like, I'd have to kind of tune all that out, and I wasn't ready for that.
And when we first started talking, you mentioned, or you referred to it as, prior to 9/11, maybe a little bit pacifist in you.
Yeah, totally.
But with all of the military in your family, was the military talked about fondly or patriotically?
Totally.
Or were you pushed away from it?
No, I you know, the ideals of every man endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, you know, like these ideas that America represents and that America stands for in the world, and that we get to wake up in the morning, choose what we're going to do, and elect who's going to lead us. These are gifts that deserve to be sacrificed for. And there are people that do that, and that's our armed services, and they deserve our support and admiration. And so, you know, that was kind of the founding perspective in my family. But we were also encouraged to think critically, you know, and not believe everything that we read or heard or saw. You know, like, if we experienced it, yeah, believe that. But everything else, take with a grain of salt.
Prior to 9/11, were you thinking the military at all?
No.
What was your future plan?
Well, I was,
other than go to college.
I was September of sophomore year of high school. So my future plan was very undefined. Go to college, get a cool job. But, you know, that's, I think, relevant to our podcast here too, is like those messages that we get when we're young, I think shape our worldview so much. And I saw my dad, like, working hard, not getting paid a lot, loved his job though. Like, and then sometimes hated his job because it got kind of monotonous. My mom was an office manager in an interior design firm. So she was doing bookkeeping, she's doing account management, she's doing project management, like a lot of moving parts. And she loved it, but she also got tired of it, you know, because she was like, well, is it really that important to make rich people's houses fancier? You know, like, could I be making better impact? So these messages were in my mind. My mom and dad split up. My mom remarried. My stepdad was a boat repair technician. Like, his specialty was repairing boats, so he had a job doing that, or his own business doing that, and then he got into selling boats, and it was pretty cool because he kind of loved it, you know. It was like he was just immersed in the boat world, which he loved all day, and there were problems to solve, and he could set his own hours and he could set his own wages, and like, that was pretty cool. I was like, I kind of want to do something, all of those. And then my grandpa's advice was, Frank, find something you love and figure out how to make a living doing it. It's like, okay, that's very concrete. So those were kind
of very solid parameters, Grandpa. Thank you.
Which, after, you know, he was like in his mid 70s at that point, probably, when he's giving me that advice. And it's like, you've seen, you know, your 4 kids grow up, your 10 grandkids. Mostly, I'm like the tail end of all that. So he's given multiple, like, I've seen written out notes to my oldest cousin about the advice that my grandpa used to give. And like, I got the
abridged version.
Just the concluding statement. Yeah.
Not even the cliff notes. It's just, it's down to 1 sentence. I need to shorten this up.
Yeah. Find what you love and figure out how to make a living doing it.
So 9/11 happens. Yeah. You start focusing on the military.
Yeah, well, it's not until I go out to the East Coast and I meet my stepmom's cousin. And this is about a year later. There's a lot of processing. It's pretty cool. I got to go to a public school, but they would have symposiums where the teachers would present topics on moral philosophy, and so we're kind of all processing 9/11 and its aftermath together. And when I go out to the East Coast my junior year, I meet my stepmom's cousin, who's the colonel in the Army, and I also meet my stepmom's other cousin, who's a major in the Marine Corps. And colonel in the Army is a staffer at the White House. He's Cheney's liaison to the military, so super high level. Like when we go to the Eisenhower building and take a little tour, he has these PhDs in his office who are talking about nuclear risk and reduction. And it's like, oh, that's cool. That's what you do. I mean, like, oh, that's one of the groups that I'm in. Yeah. I go and meet my stepmom's other cousin, who's a major in the Marine Corps, and he's just like,
polar opposite.
Totally, just the most charismatic and like lead from the front, and pretty incredible guy. So like, I could see myself fitting in this group. Like, I'll be different, but they're wonderful guys who have a life of service and love what they're doing. I would like to see if I can make a difference doing that.
Now, you mentioned college and ROTC. Were any of the academies a consideration for you?
I wanted, again, to have that rounded life, and a few people went to the academies from my high school, but what we heard back was like, life gets really narrow, when you're at Annapolis or West Point. I don't think we had any Air Force guys, or gals. So I did not desire to go to any of the service academies.
We'll just leave it at there.
Yeah. I got to play lacrosse too. Junior year of high school, senior year of high school, we started a lacrosse team. And it was so fun. And I know they have great programs at those schools, and there was no chance I was going to make those teams. So
you know your limitations.
Yeah, well, yeah. By that, lacrosse teaches you limitations. There's a dude that's 200 pounds. You're 140. You should not go head to head with that guy.
Graduated 2003?
Yeah.
And you mentioned going to the East Coast. So did you end up graduating high school in California?
Yeah, it was just a college visit on the East Coast. So,
where, as far as selecting the colleges you were going to go to, was a specific ROTC program your high priority, or was it just a secondary?
They do this crosstown enrollment. So as long as there's a school within, I think, like 50 or 60 miles of the school you go to that has a ROTC program that you're applying for, if you get into that school, you then, commute to do ROTC at that program. So,
and you mentioned you went the Marine Corps route originally. So did you have to make that decision or selection while you were in ROTC?
Yeah. So to get into ROTC, you have to apply for a scholarship with the branch that you're hoping to get into. And because Marine Corps is a Department of Navy, right, program, their funding is basically the same. You apply for a Navy ROTC scholarship Marine option, but I was able to transfer that into the Navy side and keep all my instructors, keep all my credits, all that stuff.
Where'd you end up going to college?
UC Berkeley, which has an ROTC program and has had it since like 1912 or 1910 maybe.
And what was the catalyst for you? Was it your choice to request the transfer, or did the Marine Corps basically go check the Navy?
Yeah, if you fail officer candidate school between junior and senior year, you don't get another chance. So, I could have dropped my scholarship at that point and then would have had to figure out what to do, but really wanted to stay in, wanted to serve, was imagining I'd be in the military for at least 4 years after graduating. So, and I'd been training with all the Navy folks, learning from the naval instructors. Like there was an 06 Navy captain in charge of the unit, and then an 05 Marine lieutenant colonel who was the executive officer of the unit. So, we were taking classes from both sides, and then 203 Navy guys were our advisors, and then a Navy chief was the admin guy. So got a lot of exposure to them, and was like, I hadn't met any Navy guys before then. And so when the necessity to switch came up, some of my peers who were younger than me, who were Marine options, were like, yeah, I don't think this is a good fit for me. And they switched out after freshman year into Navy. And I was like, oh, I didn't know we could do that. I didn't know it was that easy. So kind of had to get pushed in that direction, but it all worked out.
And you already mentioned this, but while you were going through that program, there was no thought in your mind that this would be a career for you? You were thinking short term?
No, actually, I was open to the idea of a career. And when I got to the fleet and I got to my first ship, you know, they always say training unit's totally different from the fleet, right? And that proved to be true in my case. The USS Pearl Harbor was an LSD-52. It was a landing ship dock, so hovercraft in the back, helicopters on top, not a big deck amphib that could keep Harriers and that level of operations, but we could land the 46s and the 53 helicopters and the Cobras, and then all the sub hunters and stuff too. But it was only a crew of 350. And then we could take on 500 Marines, and there are about 30 officers. So we got to the fleet when they thought that training was too expensive to do it right. And so they got rid of the 6 months of professional training that they used to give surface warfare officers after they graduated from ROTC or the academy to really get them ready to be division officers and officers of the deck driving the ship. And they gave us these CD-ROMs to go learn from after working in our divisions and standing our watches. And it was up to the ship to run that training program. But after we ran the ship aground in 2010 off the coast of Kuwait, one of the findings of the Commodore's staff was that there was not sufficient junior officer training going on board the ship. And I've talked to other guys that were in the Navy a little bit before me, and they're like, well, yeah, when I worked with him at the meadery, and he was like, yeah, this is like our work centers. You know, we got to have the critical parts on hand, and we got to have a backup of all the the materials that we go through frequently. And I was like, really? That's what your work centers were like? And he was like, yeah, I mean, didn't you get inspected on that every month? And I was like, dude, we literally had to steal stuff from other ships when we were getting inspected for our congressionally mandated inspection. It was known that you go and get that part from another ship if you don't have it. This wasn't squirrely stuff. It was everyone down the chain saying, well, yeah, go borrow that. So that was the level of material readiness and training that I walked onto that ship. And after we ran the ship aground, we got a nuclear officer on board as our CO. And he was amazing. And he was like, hey, guys, these rules exist for a reason, and your job is to understand them and enforce them. And I was like, that's our job. We'd been taught, officer leads. And
you're active how many years at this point?
1.
Okay.
Yeah, a little over 1. So he was awesome. He really turned the ship around, but it took him a good 2.5. I was on board for 2 years and 10 months, and he took over about a year in, and then we had a year and 10 months together, and then he had it for another, I think, 4 months. And by the time that he was done, it was a warship ready for tasking. It had all the parts it needed. It everything worked. But when he got there, we would drop the electrical load in the Straits of Hormuz, off the coast of Iran. And the engineering officer of the watch would get a Burger King crown that had been painted over black and written King of Darkness on it. And so he's like, is this McHale's Navy? No, we are supposed to be the world's most powerful Navy. And we're off the coast of one of our acknowledged adversaries, and we lose power and weapon systems, and no one thinks this is a problem. I thought that was a problem. Yeah, but everyone else thought it was okay.
Nobody else seemed to care.
Yeah, so it was but Dave Galuzian is this man's name, and he went on to be a captain of a big deck amphib and then a Fibron Commodore. And then he got out of the Navy about 2 years ago, and I got to go to his retirement ceremony out in Norfolk, and it was awesome. And he really taught us a lot. And when I was doing my board for Officer of the Deck, which is where the captain, the XO, all the department heads, the master chief, they're all up there grilling you on what you do to run the ship when the captain's sleeping, or and
don't hit an iceberg.
And my captain's like, all right, here's a hypothetical scenario. We're pulling into Guam, and there's a long rock wall jetty off the southern side of I think it's whatever the right side as you're going in, and you're getting constant bearing decreasing range. Jetty's just getting closer. What are you gonna do? And I'm like, slow down and turn around and reapproach. And he's like, yes, exactly. Unless we're taking fire, you got all the time you need. And like, that lesson has just been so critical in my life, running a business and having a family. It's like, okay, if we don't know what we're doing and no one's shooting at us, we can stop and we can figure it out, reapproach it if we have to. Like, nothing is forcing us to go into harm's way here. So I don't know, that feels relevant.
How suited were you already aware, or when did you become aware that, all right, when I'm done with this commitment for officer status, your EAS?
Thanks. Sorry. Yeah.
When did the light bulb for you come on? They're like, nope, I'm going to get out.
Cool. Yeah. So we get home from that deployment when we're losing power off the coast of Iran, and our captain is just taken over, and I get moved to machinery division, which is in charge of the propulsion engines and the generators, which means that my cush job in deck department, where I was like nominally in charge of the air part, but we didn't have any air on board, right? And then whatever. I get transferred to a much more demanding work environment because there's a lot of broken stuff and there's a lot of guys and gals that need more training. And we're pretty short staffed because the captain's been like, this is a culture of complacency. I have to fire everyone that is not here to work hard. And so that meant like all 3 of our chiefs in the department got fired, and it was pretty wild. And we had this congressionally mandated inspection coming up. And, if you don't pass the congressionally mandated inspection, captains lose jobs, commodores lose jobs. It's pretty serious. So we had a lot of work cut out for us. And it became 16, 18-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week. And it's like sometimes the only part of my day that I enjoyed was riding my bike to work and nominally riding home. But when I had to ride home at 10 p.m. at night to then get up at 5 a.m. to then get back to work the next day, like, that got pretty grinding. And I would come home and just lay on the floor.
Few choice words.
Yeah. Like, got married that next year, and my captain almost didn't let me go to my wedding because I was so focused on fixing broken stuff that I wasn't getting ahead on the training program that needed to get back in place before this inspection. And so he's like, Frank, I called you to this meeting. There's 50 things on this list. Looks like you've only done 2 of them. I'm like, well, sir, we're fixing things and da-da-da. He's like, really? I'm like, yes. And he's like, okay, I saw that leave request shit for your wedding in 6 weeks. If you want to go, you will have these 50 things done. I'm like, oh, okay. So, that's sometimes what you got to do to get the job done. And so I started working really hard because I wasn't going to not go to my wedding, and got all the things done. And I got back from the wedding and then would come home and just lie. It was the point where we were no longer, the ship was in the yards. Like, we'd been working on that stuff at base, and then the ship got moved to the yards. And if Navy guys are out there and gals, I'm sure you'll know how the yards feel. But for those that don't, it was like walking through Mordor, man. You saw these giant dudes who are all ashy because all they do is weld all day, and they're standing in a circle doing their warm-up exercises that are required for their risk reduction, right? And they're just and then you just hear the intense buzz of welding going on in the background, and grinders going on in the background, and giant machines lifting metal, and sparks flying, and it's like, okay, this is what Tolkien was talking about. And so after a few days of that, I came home one night and I just laid on the floor and didn't talk. And my wife was like, Frank, I don't think you're happy. I'm like, what? I'm not.
Is it that obvious?
Yeah, well, I really wasn't even conscious of my own state. I was just so exhausted. And she's like, no, you come home and you don't talk. You love talking. I'm like, oh, yeah, I do. You're right. She's like, well, I don't think you're happy. I'm like, really? She's like, yeah, I mean, usually you're very happy. You smile a lot. You laugh. Like the last few weeks you've been coming home and like, I don't know if we want to have our life like this. And I'm like, oh yeah, I think you're right. Like,
where are you stationed at this point?
32nd Street, San Diego. Pretty sweet spot, you know, but when all you're doing is working, like, you know, all right, well, if everything gets done by Friday, you won't have to come in on Saturday or Sunday. Oh, that didn't get done. So you got to come in on Saturday. Oh, got more stuff to do Sunday. So everyone's coming in Sunday. You know,
like this aspect wasn't on the pamphlet.
Well, you know, you give your life to this thing, right? And like in India, I got to go to India during college. I got to travel abroad with my wife, Teresa, and they signed my leave chit through the ROTC unit. And we talked to some young guys out there. They're like, oh, you're in the military. How long do you have in your indenture? I'm like, what? I'm not indentured. What are you talking about? He's like, well, that's not what they call your contract in America. It's like, no, it's a contract. We're not indentured. But think about it. If we don't show up to work, we go to jail. So we are giving our life to this thing. And there's the risk of giving the ultimate sacrifice. So yeah, I guess this is like, I signed up to give my life for this thing. And to those that can make it work and make a family life work, you know, like kudos. Like there were some guys that I got to work for who loved it, you know, and some women that loved it. But for my wife and I, we imagined really our family life being foundational, and we couldn't imagine loving our kids and raising them the way we imagined while, you know, dad being on the ship 16 hours a day, you know, 18 hours a day when we're in port and then underway and not really being present, you know.
Well, and more importantly, when you come home, you're either so physically exhausted, so mentally exhausted that you're just checked out.
And you have this culture of really rigid expectations, right? And authority and discipline. And like, if you don't want to raise your kids that way, I don't know, some guys make it work. Like there were some chiefs who had these kids who were super well adjusted. And they were like, oh yeah, we run fire drills at the house, you know, like they made it fun. It was fun for them. And they were also like, sir, you know, you get a short tour. That's when you have kids, and then you get to bond with them. And then, you know, you got to have a strong partner who can be there when you're gone and hold it up when you're gone, and a strong support system. You know, like the folks that have that support system, I think are the ones, and that expectation and that teamwork as spouses are the ones that make it work. I've got one buddy who I went to high school with. He went to Annapolis. He's in line for command of a destroyer. And like he and his wife are locked in, they got kids, and it's going well for them, you know, and I'm stoked for him. But yeah, coming home and just being physically, mentally exhausted and probably not having that same level of discipline, like I could see how the gears would grind.
Well, and that's the big thing that I've noticed in talking to a lot of the veterans. It's unfortunately one or the other, in the sense that you need a strong spouse, but at the same token, some of them see the big picture and they go forth and prosper, do what you got to do, I'll take care of home. The other ones go, wait a minute, I didn't realize you were going to be gone 369 days a year, you know, and you do have kids. And so it's that pull of family while trying to stretch out a 20 or 30 year career. Unfortunately, I haven't met a lot who have made it successfully.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a few. Captain Campbell, I don't know if you'd be interested in me connecting you with him, but he was my commanding officer at the Surface Warfare Enterprise, where I worked on ComNav Surf Force. So after I got off of Pearl Harbor, I tore my ACL in my right knee between ships snowboarding, and couldn't go to my second ship because my leg was not fit for sea duty. So
going left when it should have gone right.
Exactly. Like walking up a stairs, they were like, well, yeah, this is not good. I was like, you sure? I think I could do this. And they're like, no, maybe after you get it repaired and rehabbed, but you're looking at 2 years for that. I was like, oh, I'm going to be done by that point. So got to the staff job, and first CO was cool, Henry Angelino, but he was only there for a couple weeks. Then we got Captain Campbell, and this guy had 5 kids at that point and was on the way with a 6th. And 26 years in, commanded, I think, 3 ships, and then was getting ready for his next show. And he's now like a project manager at an engineering firm, and has like young kids still, and he was cool, man. Like he was in charge of a cruiser that could shoot down nuclear missiles, like not a what's it called? Just a paper pusher. Like dude knew how to lead and get stuff done. But when he was in the office, he ran things very calm, very smooth, very clear, really delegated a lot, but focused his attention where it needed to, so that the whole thing just clicked together beyond anything that I'd seen in the Navy at that point. And so somehow he figured it out. Maybe he'd be worth talking to.
For you, when you got assigned the staff spot, was that because you were rehabbing your knee?
Pretty much. Yep. That, you go on limited duty. So then the offices like put in, hey, if you got a limited duty, we'd love a staffer in here. So I lucked out because it was really cool. I went from on the deck plates where there was a lot of chaos and a lot of gaps in the chain, to the office that was in charge. The Surface Warfare Enterprise worked for Commander Naval Surface Forces. So Commander Naval Surface Forces is in charge of all the surface ships in the Navy. And the Surface Warfare Enterprise was this idea to de-silo all of the infrastructure that supported those surface ships. So rather than the logistics guys not talking to the engineering guys and the engineering guys not talking to the training guys, right? Which is how it used to happen. What if they could all harmonize that activity and get a lot more efficient and drive, they called it business outcomes, which triggered a lot of people because like people are like, military's not business, like you're going to go to war whether it's profitable or not. So I think there's always a bit of messaging and challenge there, but the idea that an officer should get trained in all of these things and be able to think across all of these categories made some sense in my mind. And I didn't receive that training, but I hoped that when I got there, I would see how the pieces fit together. And that's where I landed, and that's how I got there.
You mentioned that pivotal moment when your wife noticed that you were not happy.
Totally.
At that point, how much did you have left on your commitment?
About 2 years.
And when you got to the staff position, did that have any impact on your mental health, your overall happiness, to where you could have potentially gone that route and stayed in?
Yeah. So I think a key part of that story, it was when I was on the floor, my wife's like, I don't think this is the way we want to live. She then said, Frank, what if you had all the time, money, and energy in the world? I was like, what? That's a real question? She's like, yeah, it's the most important question. If you don't start there, what are you doing with your life? I was like, oh, wow. So I was like, well, that's such a big question. All the time, all the money, all the energy in the world. I'm going to have to sit with that one, wake up in the morning. I'm stoked. I'm fire, I'm stag leaping out of bed here. All the money, like never going to run out of the resources I need. Like that's not going to slow me down. And then all the time, like it's not what you get done today, not what you get done this year. It's like, you're going to get it done. You got all the time you need. What would you do? I was like, oh, that is the coolest question. So sat with it for a couple weeks and got back to her with, I want to make mead and share it with people. I want to farm and I want to live in community. Because in college, one of my favorite parts of living there was like the cheapest option of living at Berkeley, which has gotten even more expensive, but it's still the cheapest. In fact, costs haven't really risen since I was there, however many years ago that was, 16 years ago, was living in these co-ops. So students during World War II who couldn't join ROTC had to find somewhere to live, but ROTC had bought all of the student housing. So they had to go buy private homes and turn them into cooperative houses. So they pulled that off by everyone doing work shift together. So I lived in a Julia Morgan mansion. She's like a famous architect who designed Hearst Castle and was a graduate of Berkeley back in the day. First female architect in California. With a view of the Golden Gate Bridge in the bay, for food and room for $1,000 a month.
Wow.
And it worked because we had 3 refrigerators, 2 stoves between 36 people. We were our own chefs. We were our own dish crew. We were our own housekeeping staff, like intensive bathroom cleanings were required once a semester for everybody, and so you got 36 people, there's 72 per year, like intense bathroom cleans, so it's going to get done. And it was a really rad program that allowed us to like have a home away from home and a deep sense of connection and community. And so that has been a part of our journey, is like looking at community and real estate investing as a way to diversify our income, so that we have this really rich quality of life with people that we know and love in our little. So we have 2.5 acres, and we have rentals on those, and we're able to help people out who need help by giving them reduced rates, but then they do some work shift. And so now we have this really stable source of income, so that the entrepreneurial activities on the business side can have some flexibility and take some of the pressure off.
So then when did you make the decision that when my commitment's done, I'm getting out?
So it's pretty much at that point when I was like, okay, this isn't what you want to do. What is it that you want to do? And when that answer materialized, it was like, oh, all that. And so we started saving half of our income at that point. So for 2 years, we basically had one salary, because she's a Navy nurse. She was a Navy nurse at the time. So we had one salary going to savings for 2 years, which was awesome. I mean, so lucky for that. But we had a budget, and as young people in San Diego, we could have spent that budget on anything, or that savings money on anything. But we were like, no, this is buying that dream. This is the seed money to make that dream happen.
And did you know that home base was going to stay in Southern California, or did you consider other parts of the country?
We would have been open to it. I think that the ball started to get rolling for us. So while I was at the Surface Warfare Enterprise, I only had an 8-hour job. I got there at 8 a.m., left
all this free
4.
time.
Yeah, it's like my wife's working from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. sometimes, so she's gonna be sleeping when I get home. Like, I got a lot of free time here, and so I would work on the business plan and get the ball rolling on it. I had 2 business partners from college who kind of planted the seed back when I was a senior. We took that last bottle of mead my grandpa made me, and we made our first batch of mead afterwards, a year later when Teresa got back from France. And it was terrible. But we were 19, 20, 21 when we drank it. So we weren't too picky. And the the things that happened with that batch of mead, man, it's a funny story. Segue? Was that okay? So Berkeley at the time, they're getting ready to rebuild the Coliseum, the stadium that the Cal Bears play in, and there's this oak grove that's like coastal live oaks, and it's one of the last oak groves in the area. And Berkeley being what it is, when it gets announced that these oak groves are going to get cut down in order to accommodate this new stadium, people move into the trees. And you gotta admire these folks on one level, because 6 months of living on a platform in a tree, pooping in a bucket, and your friends taking care of that. Sorry, I don't know if that's anyways, like, it's like
some commitment.
That's dedication right there. So a couple of my friends and I are walking past one day with a bottle of mead, and they're like, hey, you guys want some mead? So the tree people got some of that mead, and I was like, can't say it's the best mead I've ever had, but hey. Anyways, that was
while you were in the Navy, did you keep, I'll say, perfecting or continuing to make mead?
Totally. Yeah. It was wild going on deployment and seeing honey from all over the world. Like, it really clicked when we were in Thailand, in Phuket, cruising around, and there's this shop that has longan fruit honey. And I'm like, what is longan fruit, and what does that honey taste like, and what kind of mead would that make? So, then we were in the Middle East and Bahrain, and there's African acacia honey, and you hear about this like magical cypress honey that exists in the Middle East that is like $50 an ounce. And I'm just like, what if? And so got super inspired to make meads from all different kinds of honey, and kept making mead. And when we would drink it, my friend who was in ROTC with me, he was like, Frank, people like this stuff. They would give us money for it. And I'm like, huh? He's like, that's how America works. So started the business with them October of 2010, like signed the papers and made our first batch. And then
Are you out of the Navy at this point?
Not yet, because I've got this awesome half-time job. And a wife who works nights, so she's not around. We then get the business rolling and get out of the Navy in May of 2011, and we have our licenses and we're selling in June of 2011.
To set up a mead business, being that it's alcohol, what was your experience, and did operating in California impact that? Operating outside of California, would it have been more beneficial, less beneficial?
That's a great question. Okay, so there were some family things going on in my life at that point that was like, I can't really imagine leaving California, extended family issues. So that was kind of what took it off the table. And then navigating it, there's this website. I've actually found California, while it's relatively expensive, to be a pretty friendly place for us. And maybe it's just the way I approach things, which I have given advice to other entrepreneurs before, and it seemed to have helped them, of like, think of bureaucrats as people who want to help people, right? They like go into these jobs to have a stable job, but also because they'd like to help the public, right? Like, they're not selfish jerks if you're going to go work in public service. At least that's been my experience. And then when you approach them this way, they kind of like, they're kind of refreshed. They're kind of like, someone's treating me like a human. Thank you. And if you're a professional with them and you are prepared and you line up what you want in a series of yes and no questions based off of the rules that you have read and that they should be aware of, but probably have to keep track of so many sets of rules that like they're reviewing it with you and it's refreshing them. So you like put it in front of them and you go, so I would like to open a tasting room in this area, which according to this regulation says should be possible, right? And then they look at it and they go, yes. And then you go, cool. So all I need to do is fill out this form, this form, and this form, right? Yes. Okay. Well, there's this one little complicating factor. And I was thinking about it, and I think we can approach it this way because of this rule here. Is that your understanding? Right? And so you're not asking them, what should I do? Because they can't give you advice, but they can answer yes or no questions. And if you have the rules and regulations and you've thought through them, it like unlocks this whole Zelda game that we're all in, where you're trying to save the princess, but you got to go like trade the flower to get the key to get into the dungeon. You know what I mean? Like, it's like there's so, and the Navy taught me that, right? It's like, you want to change out the power cords so that the ship can have a stable form of power when you're in port? Well, you're going to need to talk to the port engineer. Oh, you're going to need to talk to the port engineer. Well, you have to go talk to his aide to go schedule a time to talk. You know what I mean? Like, there's just so many steps that you think it should be this simple, but it actually is a process of accomplishing all these little steps. So California, for me, really unlocked when I found this website called calgold.ca.gov, CalGold. And it's a rad website. You can put in what kind of business you want to start, what county you're starting it in, and it'll spit out all the potential compliance that you need to worry about. And so I was like, this is rad. I think I don't remember how I found out about it. Maybe it was a small business administration class that I took, but I think I was just Googling, like, how do you start a business in California? And like this popped up. And so it listed the federal licenses that I needed to get as a winemaker, the state license I needed to get. If there's any building permits, if you're going to have CO2 bottles, like all of the levels of compliance. And what I have found is that if you strive for 100% compliance and you make a really good effort, if you get caught because you weren't aware, or like it's in progress, they go, well, when is it going to get fixed? And then you give them a realistic update, and then they go, okay, like we'll check in with you then. And then if you have it done, they're like, cool, no worries. It's when people like kind of run away from the problem that they start to go like, what are you doing?
And circumvent the obvious.
I think so. And not make a good faith effort. Like if everyone's making a good faith effort, these people don't want to penalize people. And then you also got to remember, you don't want their bosses to get pissed off, right? So like they've got to have a good report to bring to their boss. So you want to be in that good report. Like, hey, what's going on with that company? Oh, that company talked to this contractor and they've got this bid scheduled. Okay. Like sometimes that's all you got to do. So I have found, and it is expensive. Like, California's expensive. You know?
You're letting the secret out of the bag.
Yeah, sunshine tax. You know, my work's 10 minutes from the beach. I get to go surfing at lunch. Like, it's great.
Now, you referenced the wine industry. So does mead fall under the exact same parameters as wine?
Yeah, legally, alcohol made from honey is an agricultural wine. As long as it's under 18% ABV. So we're regulated by the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Tax Bureau, and that's on the federal level, and then the state of California as a winery.
The company you created, Gold Coast Mead.
Golden Coast.
Golden Coast Mead.
Yeah.
My apologies.
No, Gold Coast is in Australia. Golden Coast is what Katy Perry sang about at about the time we were getting started. It was pretty funny.
As far as having that business, when you're making quantities of mead to be able to operate a business, how much did you have to pre-make and have on hand to where you could start selling it?
Dude, it's still a problem. You know, like growing a business, managing demand, managing customer expectations is something that people get advanced degrees in, right? And I think reputation is the way to think about it. Do you have a good reputation with your customers because you've been like, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we've got for you. We're going to run out soon. So if you want it, get it now. If you run out, call us back or we'll come visit you in a couple weeks. And oh, man, the number of nights sleep that I have lost because we're going to run out of product. You don't want to run out of product for like core customers that are backbones to your business. But secondary sales channels that are more flexible, that's where the wiggle room comes in. And so we've kind of figured out, I'm like visualizing this kind of graph where like 50% of it is always stocked. And then this extra stock goes to these more flexible channels, but we keep these key customers happy.
Were you able to get all of this in place before you transitioned out?
So we got the licensing in place. We got the first batch made of roughly 1,000 liters, 1,000 bottles. And we were up and selling June of 2011. And I got out in May of 2011.
And for the business to operate, there's a lot of different aspects that I want to talk about. Selling alcohol. Can you ship all over the world, all over the country? Does mead still fall? Because I know there's some states where you can't ship alcohol into, for instance, Pennsylvania. Does mead?
That's just opened up in the last year.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's evolved a lot. When we first started, we would have had to get licenses for each state that we wanted to ship into and file reports with their government. Now there is a service that we use, and it just appears like a online shopping channel called Vino Shipper, and part of their percentage, which is very reasonable, is managing all that for us. So we're able to ship to 40 states legally, which is awesome. State of California, we could do without any of that, but
because I would imagine that, especially today where so much is purchased and sold online, not being able to ship to certain states could definitely impact your sales.
Yeah, Amazon took a go at it, and we were, I think, one of the first 3 meads on Amazon at one point, and then they were like, this is too complicated. So they cut that. But Vino Shipper has been a key part of our business, and we hope to see it grow. You know, people from all over the country can get it.
We've kind of hinted around it. So for those who don't know what mead is, its base is honey.
Correct.
Go from there.
Cool. Mead is the alcohol you get when you ferment honey. Typically 12% alcohol, like a wine or a champagne. You can make a lower 5%, 7%, 3%, but who would want to drink that? No. You can make it higher, 18, 24. Then if you distill it, which is the process of boiling the mead so that the alcohol evaporates and then you capture and condense that, you could make a mead spirit or honey shine or, mead shine, sunshine. There's lots of names for it. Mead brandy. And we've had a couple experiments with some distiller partners who are licensed to do that. And they've turned out awesome, but the economics on it, like honey is the most expensive fermentable sugar. So mead is not as cheap as beer and wine, but we like to say that beer and wine are the cheap knockoffs of mead, And one thing that I love about mead is that we have to use a half a pound of honey to make a 12% alcohol mead. And this half a pound of honey, they did research in the 30s, and it takes the bees visiting 2 million flowers to make 1 pound of honey. So half a pound is 1 million flower visits, right? That liquid gold. Have a mead maker friend named Benjamin Pixie who tells people like, in the course of her lifetime, a bee will make 1/12 to 1/2 of a teaspoon of honey. And she takes something that would disappear, just evaporate, right, after 2 or 3 days, that nectar, and turns it into something that will last forever. Pretty rad. And so as mead makers, we get to work with that and turn that into something you can drink, share with your friends, create a party with. And we find that mead is a very bubbly, giddy kind of drink. And we love it.
And being that honey is the base, you've also ventured into the bee industry and making your own honey.
Right.
The little bit that I understand, though, about making honey is, do you source all of your honey from one geographic area? Because I understand that the geographic region and the plants and the flowers and everything that the bees interact with has a completely different impact on the honey made in that area.
Awesome, Paul. Yeah, this is another thing we love to talk about, is that bees will fly on average up to 3 miles from their hive to gather nectar. So imagine a 27 square mile area around where your hives are, and the bees are gathering nectar from all over. In the morning, the scout bees go out, they scope out what's out there. They have these compound eyes that have 1,000 lenses on each eye, and they can see infrared and ultraviolet. And so when they're flying around, they also have like 3 eyes on the front, so they get this like tunnel vision of not crashing into things. But then they're taking in all this ultraviolet infrared light through this compound 2,000 lens thing. Imagine what that looks like. There are physicists and entomologists who say it's like a hologram. They're like flying through this,
Kaleidoscope.
Exactly. And the flowers are putting out, aromas that we smell, but those are electrochemical light signals to the bees, all with their own frequency. And so the bees are picking that up, and then the flowers themselves appear like these landing strips. I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of flowers under ultraviolet or infrared light. They look totally different, like a firework, and drawing the bee into where the nectar is and where the pollen is, so that the bee can help that plant reproduce by spreading that pollen around. So what's in flower will get visited by these scout bees. They'll bring the nectar back to the hive, and they'll give a little sample of the nectar to their sister bees who are going to go out and collect honey, and they'll do this waggle dance. Have you heard about this? So rad. So German beekeeper in like the 50s had a little puppet bee where he proved this out. But the bee comes home, gives a little drop of nectar, and then dances this dance where it wiggles. Sorry, I was working on a project this morning. Where it wiggles as it walks, and then it walks an angle while it dances. And that's the distance from the hive that the bee needs to fly to find this nectar, and the angle relative to the sun. So a beekeeper who's paying attention can collect a certain kind of nectar to make a varietal honey when those bees are collecting that nectar. Or a beekeeper can just blend it, and given a certain place and a certain time of year, that's all the plants that were in flower in that area. And so honey reflects both individual flowers and their nectar, or ecosystems and a time of year, in a way that like wine kind of aspires to talk about terroir, but honey talks about ecosystems.
So the honey produced in a given hive in a set geographic area, the flavor or the profile of it is going to change throughout the year.
Exactly.
Based on what flowers in that region are flowering.
And therefore the mead will change too.
So from a consistency perspective and being able to create mead, what controls did you have to put in place as far as where you're sourcing your honey from?
That's a great question. And something we consult on. No, my business partner, our CEO, got his hands around that program because when he joined the company, we were not consistent, and it was really frustrating because we'd get some momentum going with a recipe and an expectation and a market, and then the honey would shift, and then we couldn't really call it the same product in good conscience. So he started buying from an organic producer that was producing in a large enough scale so we could be really confident in the quality of this honey and the integrity of the beekeeping. Because I don't know if you know about honey, it's like the third most spoofed food in the world. After olive oil and seafood. Honey is the next most fraudulent food in the world. A lot of honey comes over from Asia, where beekeepers either feed their bees corn syrup and then call what they exude honey, or they just blend corn syrup, beet syrup, all kinds of other sugars into honey. And we don't really have the controls in our country to stop that. So know your beekeeper and know where your honey's coming from. And we're really stoked on this group that we're working with. A lot of integrity, a long history doing it. And when you pull the string on their whole operation, they're transparent and they're happy to show you how it all works, which, you know, if people start being like, oh yeah, we'll show you that, and then they never follow up with you, and, you know, are dragging their feet and getting you any kind of proof when you ask them questions, that's like major warnings. This is not legit. So this group's selling us this organic honey, and we're blending different regions to get a consistent flavor profile.
And not to compare in the sense of, well, I am comparing, but that's what most large wine manufacturers do. They source their grapes from a given area, but year to year, season to season, you may have to increase this type of varietal and decrease this one, so that because when you're in the business of selling a product, people want it to taste the same every time they crack the bottle open.
Orange juice, I don't know, 3 years of orange juice is kept down in Florida, and it's like blended to try to achieve this consistent flavor profile.
Because I would imagine very few customers, for the most part, are going to be open to, hey, 2020's mead is going to be different than 2021's mead. Then maybe I'm wrong.
You got to find the right ones. And there are, like, you know, if it's a bell curve, definitely that leading edge of the bell curve that's stoked on it. And they go after it, and they love the vertical flight comparisons. But like, 1 out of 10 people has ever tried mead before, you know? So we're already taking the bell curve of humanity and cutting it down to 1 out of 10. And then in that bell curve, it's like a leading edge of them. So we're trying to do that consistent, high quality. You can buy a Golden Coast Wildflower Sour, and it's going to be the Wildflower Sour you had last time and the Wildflower Sour that you had next time. Maybe some variations in the theme, but like, you're going to know it.
Is mead aged in barrels like wine?
It can be. Our style is more like a champagne production, and that we're doing it in stainless and then getting it in the bottle. So that's where we want our mead to be. In the future, if we had all the money and all the space, barrel aging is rad, but it's like this totally unknown country. And sometimes you lose the batch, and to us, like 50 gallons in a barrel of mead is too valuable to lose, you know? Because it's so delicate. Mead is like a broth. A pinch of salt will change the broth, right? Whereas wine is like a soup, right? Like there's the tannins and the acids of the grapes, and so a pinch of salt might not be as noticed. And beer is like a stew. You got hops in there. You got complex carbohydrates that aren't fermented yet. So a pinch of salt, you wouldn't even notice it. And that, right? Like if something goes wrong in a mead, it's like the broth's getting spoiled.
And aren't there meads that do more of a hybrid where they get close to a beer?
Totally. They're called braggots. Very confusing for people who are new to mead, but it's basically where you mash you ferment the barley, wash, and then you add honey in that fermentation. So it's a hybrid of beer production and mead production. We try not to do that because it's just too confusing. We do add hops to some of our meads, but that's technically an herbed mead, which is called a methlygan, which is where the word medicine came from in Old Welsh, which meant like drink your mead with herbs and spices, and that'll make you better.
And when we started this, you were talking about that bottle, your grandfather's last bottle. When people talk about wine, the one thing that comes up a lot is like aging it and holding it. And we're here in Temecula. Temecula Valley wines aren't typically known for being long-yeared storage wines.
50 years. Yeah.
You know,
years.
if you talk to, or at least most of the wineries that I've been to, and if you talk to them there, we're a 3 to 5 year wine. This is not the wine you're going to save for your 25th wedding anniversary. How does mead get impacted by the aging process?
Oh, it's so cool. So UC Davis, premier winemaking university in the world, is now doing a little bit of mead research and mead education. And Ken Schramm, who wrote the book on mead making that took mead making from like a kind of Ren Fair sideshow to like a legit craft beverage. We're all working on understanding those big questions because there's just so many variables. If I spat out an answer at you right now, it would not be honest because there's so many variables in there. I mean, one of the foundational variables in mead that we haven't understand is how do different honeys and all of their chemical precursors, because of course there's sugar in honey, but what gives honey its unique flavor and what gives varietal honey its flavor that's different one varietal to the next is all these secondary components like esters, polyphenols, right? The stuff that the plant makes to make the aroma unique and to make the color different and the nutritional content of these honeys. They vary, right? The darker honeys have more bioflavonoids and all these cool compounds that are healthier for us, and the lighter ones don't, but they can be so delicate and beautifully flavored. And when these compounds come into contact with the yeast, which is like metabolizing it according to that yeast specific DNA, different flavor compounds are going to get produced as a byproduct of this fermentation. And what that matrix of choices is, this kind of honey with this kind of yeast equals what kind of mead, is unknown. Like no meadery is big enough and no honey company has seen the value in investing in this research. But if we could, we would get this chart that said, oh, you're using this kind of honey, then you want to rule out these kinds of yeasts because they just make bad meads. And you want to focus on these kinds of yeasts because the research has shown that that is like the practical way to do it. In the 50s, the brewing world did this kind of research and guided brewing so much further along its course. We're behind that in the mead world. So answering your question about aging in barrels is totally, what's the word when one person knows it, but there's no data about it? Anecdotal. It's totally anecdotal. And so Lost Cause down in San Diego has been doing a lot of barrel aging meads, and Billy Belts, the owner, who was a fan of ours and kind of helped him get started, he was like, yeah, it's a case by case basis. And when it tastes good, I blend it and bottle it up. And if it doesn't taste good, I wait longer and hope it'll taste better later, or that I can blend it with something so that it becomes a good component in something else.
Basics.
He also does higher sugar meads and higher alcohol meads, which tend to age better. Like our 12% relatively dry meads, like almost bone dry, like less than 1% residual sugar. So technically dry, but the mead is so thin that the perceived sweetness is much higher than a wine that would be at the same sweetness. Those are good for about 2 years, and then they kind of fall off at that point. So that's what we recommend to people.
For pairing with food, does mead inherently bring too much sweetness to the quote unquote table all the time where it makes it more difficult to pair?
That's a great question, Paul. We just did a podcast on our Regenerative Mead podcast with Chrissy Zaurpour, who wrote the book, The Art of Mead Tasting and Food Pairing. And it's this beautiful, thick book that has like 100 recipes in it and is all about how you pair mead and food. And one of her main pieces is the sweetness of mead plays really nice with something spicy. So these cuisines that don't really work with beer and wine, like, you know, Thai cuisine, Indian cuisine, Chinese cuisine, African cuisine, like there is such a case to be made that mead is the drink to pair with them. And that sweetness in the mead complements these spicy flavors and lets you kind of, you know, engage the whole body, get a little sweaty, but then have that drink of cool, sweeter, rich mead. And hopefully it has some flavors that complement or amplify the flavors in the dish. And now you're having this really beautiful culinary experience.
Do you drink mead chilled or room temperature?
Depends on the style, just like wine,
okay.
Right? Champagne, you drink chilled. Port, you drink cellar temp. You know, there's lots of different approaches. Our styles are more bubbly. We make them in Southern California where it's warm. We want them to be refreshing, so we recommend chilling them. Some of our styles, though, do great at cellar temp, even up to room temp. But room temp is better for the more sweet kind of dessert wines that you're drinking in the winter where it's cold.
And we always talk about wine, and Napa is the first thing that most people think of. And then you got the Central Coast or Central Valley, the Paso Robles area. Oh. But as far as regions within California, are there more well-known mead regions? And is there the most well-known mead region in the United States?
Cool. So at this point, I think we've got about 8 meaderies here in San Diego County, and then 2 up in Orange County. So there's a smattering. Like, we're one of the more dense regions for mead, but we're a drop in the bucket compared with wine or beer or spirits. Right. So SoCal, we're kind of the only ones that are doing these light, refreshing, and our sour mead is a one of a kind. Like, there really aren't any other commercial sour meads being produced here in Southern California.
And what makes it sour?
We use a lactobacillus culture co-fermented with the ale yeast. So the ale yeast makes alcohol. The lactobacillus converts some of the sugar into lactic acid. So it's this yogurty tartness on top of the sweet honey note from the aromas of the honey that are left over, because all that sugar has been converted into alcohol.
Would it be similar to like a sour beer?
Yeah, it's more. I like to compare it more to a champagne. Okay, but with a little touch of tartness at the end.
Got it.
Yeah, and then a florality, and it's really beautiful. I meant to bring you our spiced sour, and then children construction project, switching cars.
It's all good.
It didn't make it.
It's all good.
Sorry. Then the sour fermentation is difficult to manage, but do I want to say master it? Actually, there's a great story that I think your listeners will appreciate. There are times in your entrepreneurial life where you're like, oh man, what am I going to do? And at this time in our life, about 7 years ago now, we were distributed in New York, and people loved the sour mead, but we could not make it consistently. And it started as a happy accident. We'd been like, this is cool. This is how we think we should make it. We'll take the trub, like the yeast that is settled in the bottom, and we'll pitch it in the next batch. And sometimes it would be awesome, and sometimes kind
of like making a sourdough bread.
Exactly. Yeah, but there were so many wild organisms in there that sometimes it tasted like horse blanket. Just not what people are into. And so,
you don't think that would market well on a label?
We had to change the label. It was called Galley Grog when we would make it, and it was funny. But we weren't really excited about it, and the people in New York weren't either. So we needed to come up with a recipe that consistently made this mead, and my business partner was out in New York, was like, dude, send me the sour mead and we will sell it all. And we needed to sell stuff at this point, so I'm like, what do we do? I hang up the phone and I'm in my driveway and I hit my head on the steering wheel and I'm just like, mead gods, please make it abundantly clear what we're supposed to do to make the sour mead. And I kind of let go of it and drive to work, and there on my doorstep is a PhD in yeast science. If there's one dude that can solve this problem, it's this guy. Thank you. And I was like, hey. And he's like, oh, can I sell you my yeast? And I was like, you know what? We're good on yeast, but what we do need your help with is figuring out how to make this sour mead. And he was like, oh, okay, yeah. I'm like, you want to try the samples and you can see the good one and the bad one and see what the difference is? And you're like, oh, yeah, I think this is a lactobacillus. I can culture it up for you. He's this funny guy. Like, PhDs are always interesting. But he then cultures it up for us, and we pitch it, and then we have consistent sour mead. And since then, we've never had a first blanket batch. So that was pretty great.
A little over a decade under your belt now.
13 years, yeah.
Selling it. What have you seen as far as the growth of the mead industry in that time?
It's so exciting. I mean, when I first started, I would schlep these bottles in the back of my station wagon, and liquor store owners would be like, huh, mead, yeah. I think I had some of that about 20 years ago. I'm not really interested. I was like, okay, just need to stick to the really crafty liquor stores, and now there's this foundational market that is pretty solid, and it's growing. And so the sales directly to the consumer are solid and growing. And then there are these expansion moments. And I feel like we're helping make those happen through kind of focusing on a partnership that could make sense, and then developing it, and then getting a product in that channel. And I think, we've done a lot of the ones that were super niche, and now it's time to like do the next tier of opportunities, like the restaurants and hotels that want to offer something really unique and really intentional. Like we've got to develop a program for them so that we can walk in there and be like, hey, I see you carry local products and you want your customers to have a unique experience. Would you be interested in this? So that's kind of the next evolution. But we're still very small, but it's definitely bigger than it was when we started, and feels like the momentum's in our side. COVID was a bit of a knockback. There was a moment before COVID when Bud Light ran those Dilly Dilly commercials, and like mead is kind of this funny little gimmick in the side of those. But if you read into those commercials, it's like the dude gets put in prison because he's bringing this unique gift to the king, right? And then he's down in prison, and like everyone's locked up, and there's a dude dude in the cage is the mead guy, and like someone has just gotten back from being out of jail and brings Bud Light, and the mead guy's like, wait, you were out of prison and you came back and brought Bud Light? And like, sorry, I think that the subtext of that is like, when you find something you love that may not be the mainstream, it may be way more awesome than what the mainstream is. You just might be the weird guy for a while.
You've already mentioned the consulting aspect, and I want to get into that aspect as we start closing this out. To finish out the aspect of mead.
Sure.
Somebody's not tried it before. Somebody wants to start getting into it. What can they expect, and what would your advice be for getting into mead?
Rad. Find a local mead producer that you feel comfortable going in and saying, I'm a total newbie and I want to try as many varieties of mead, because it's like wine, right? Like there's everything from champagne and port and high body intense cabs to like light floral whites. Mead can be all of these things. And then there's Manischewitz, there's like Boone's Farm. Like those are technically wines too, right? And mead is as broad as that. And sometimes like people drink, the Thunderbird of mead, and it's like, oh, I don't like mead. It's like, well, you haven't tried the good stuff, that stuff that's really intentionally made. And that's probably because they're wood shedding it, and they're very small and local, and their distribution isn't big, and they don't have an ad budget, but they're passionate craftspeople all over the country. And if you Google mead, in your region, like mead in Southern California, mead in San Diego, like options will pop up. And so going there, talking with those people, finding the varieties that you like, understanding how they're made and what styles they are, will then help you find other producers that do that same kind of style.
And most of the larger producing entities have tasting rooms like a typical winery?
Yeah.
And do you guys have that?
We have the smallest tasting room we can have. It's like 8 seats, but we had a larger one. COVID, we were turning over money and spending a lot of time on it. We were like, I think we could grow if we focus this time somewhere else. So we closed the tasting room, but we've got a little a mead shop attached to our production building in Oceanside that people can show up Thursday to Saturday, 3:30 to 7:30. Micah's our gal there, and she's super passionate and super knowledgeable. And then there are other meaderies that have tasting room. Twisted Horn and Vista has like a full-on Viking themed mead hall, which Vince is super into that, and he's a really great guy. So like you go there, his styles are going to be more like fruited, like 8% meads, whereas ours are like traditional 12% or like herbed 12%. Lost Cause down in San Diego has a great tasting room, a couple great tasting rooms, and they're doing very well. And they have more like dessert style, like kind of have an ounce or two at a time, but they're really beautiful, and they won a ton
of like
awards.
A port.
Yeah, but very creative. It kind of defies.
I only went down the route of you're not going to drink large quantities of port.
No, right.
So it's going to be that very specific event, very
special. Yeah. It's the end of the night. Hey, you guys want to try something interesting? Like, oh, the party's not really over yet. What should we do? Let's pull this out, have a little bit, talk about it. Yeah, that kind of thing.
So I'd like to transition now into, if I did my research correctly, you created a mead. I don't want to use the word collective, but it's a learning portal for those wanting to get into mead?
Yeah, Mead Institute. So we saw there's a lot of demand and need to understand quality in the mead world and in a way start to get the industry to come together around some standards for quality, because mead is hard to make well. Honey wants to kill yeast. When yeast is stressed because the honey's trying to kill it, it puts off all these chemicals that are intended to protect the yeast but end up tasting bad. So if a producer is making mead and not aware of that, they're making stuff, and over time, after tasting things repeatedly or not knowing what we're tasting, we get acclimatized to that flavor profile, so we can no longer pick it out. And then a new customer who's more sensitive because they haven't had as many experiences will taste it and they're like, whoa, that's not pleasant. So we've got to educate the mead industry on that. We've helped over 20 meaderies get started, which is pretty rad. And there's like this learning curve where if people aren't willing to learn what it takes to make a good mead, I mean, they could work with someone else to make that mead and then just do like the branding and marketing and sales side of a business, which is a significant amount of work. But on the production curve, you got to understand what it takes to make clean, good tasting mead. And that's why Mead Institute exists. And we also have to understand that mead is at least 51% honey in its fermentable sugars, right? There are people who have recognized that sugar is a lot cheaper than honey, and there's not a legal definition of what mead is. And so their fermentation recipe is less than 51% honey. I don't think that that's fair to call that a mead. That's a sugar wine with honey added.
So to wrap this up, any last pieces of advice for veterans and just becoming your own business owner from your experience?
Oh, man. Yeah, I think that question, what you would do with all the time, money, and energy in the world, is such a key question to answer, because when it's been hard, and there's been a lot of times where it's like, whoa, what are we going to do now? I've come back to that question and it's like, well, this is what I'd be doing if I had everything. So I better figure this out so that I can do that. Maybe there's a case like you go and work for tech and get paid as much as you can for 10 years and then have a solid nest egg that you then draw an interest off of and then use that to start your business. But is that worth those 10 years? I don't know. I've certainly learned a lot in the 13 years that we've been doing this, and kind of felt like it was 3 years ago that we finally got the wheel rolling, and then COVID happened, but the wheel's still rolling. So that's good. So talking to your audience or our audience and answering that question, what would you do with all the time, money, and energy in the world? And then looking at what pieces you need to put in place, and then what do you need to do to get those pieces in place? My sister-in-law and brother-in-law are both Navy vets, and they run 2 dog kennels. And she got an MBA after getting out of the Navy. He didn't. He's just a smart, hardworking guy. And they would just make lists. What do we need to have happen in order to make these goals real? And then they would just work that list together, And I think one thing too is diversified sources of income is such a wonderful thing. If you've got income coming in from multiple places, then all of the stress, all of the need to pay your bills and feed your family doesn't have to rest on the business's back. And so when there are those moments where it's like, oh, we're going a little fast and we might crash, instead of like, well, we have to do something because we're not going to have food if we don't. If you haven't diversified your income, that can really increase the strain there. So I highly recommend that folks either talk to a financial advisor or get smart about investing and property, because when we're young, we think the only way we can make money is wages. Or at least that was me. Public schools, like you go and you work and you get paid. But capitalism is based off of rents and interest too, right? Like there's wages, one way to bring in money, but getting paid rent for your real estate, that's another way to bring in money. And getting paid interest for letting someone else use your capital by investing is another way to make money. So wouldn't you rather have 3 horses in the race than just one? And that has really helped us out, and we achieved that by clearly saving for years before we got out.
when you made the transition out, did already having that next mission, that next vision help you, or did you struggle with getting out?
No. So you kind of asked that question earlier and I kind of got sidetracked, but to get back to that, like once my wife asked me that question, I was like, right, this is what we're doing. And so we started saving, and I finished up my time on the ship. Well, luckily, because that was rough, but we fixed a lot of things that were broken, which was cool. And I learned a lot about fixing stuff, which I often reflect on, like, could Golden Coast Mead exist if I had not been in that engineering space 14 hours a day, because there was an hour of running around and then an hour of admin time. But like, I was down in this pit of pipes and machines and like, oh, that valve doesn't work. Okay. Now that pump doesn't work. Okay. Now that filter that fed that pump doesn't work. It's like, but now, like, there are times at the space, like, we have literally designed our own glycol chilling system. When my glycol tech was like, how's that going to work? And I like drew him a diagram. He's like, oh, yeah, I guess I will. So I don't know. There's skills that help you. But to answer your question, I was like, here's the vision. It looks so joyful and so free that I'm just going to do that. Like, yeah, if I stayed in another 2 years, I could get a GI Bill to go to grad school. But I don't want to stay another 2 years in this organization. Like, I want to be out there doing what I love and sharing it with the world and pursuing that quest rather than showing up and getting a paycheck.
I appreciate your time.
Oh, Paul, thanks.
Continued success on your company.
I really appreciate the depth you went into in preparation for this. I can tell you love learning, and I'm grateful that this podcast exists, man.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.